The grand hall of the Zalorian Empire was built to make others feel small. Its crystal towers stretched so high they touched the clouds, and the floors shone like polished mirrors. The banners of 1,000 conquered worlds hung from silver beams, whispering the stories of victories long past. Every breath inside that hall carried the weight of history and pride. Princess Lithera stood near the center, wrapped in flowing robes of blue silk that shimmered like water under sunlight. Her crown glowed faintly with the pulse of living gems. She looked calm, composed, perfect, just as a princess of the most powerful empire in the galaxy was expected to be. But inside, her heart stirred with a strange unease. Today was different. Today the humans were coming. The name itself felt odd in her mouth. Humans. A new species among the stars, young and fragile. Barely a century into interstellar flight, many in the Empire saw them as nothing more than a curiosity. Bold perhaps, but insignificant. They had no great fleets, no genetic enhancements, no psychic gifts, just flesh, bone, and willpower, and yet they had survived things that stronger races had not. Lithera had read the reports. The wars of Earth, the plagues, the climate storms, the near extinction, and still they stood. No empire behind them, no ancient power guiding them, only courage and stubborn hope. She wondered what kind of people they must be to rise again and again from the ashes. The sound of the great bronze doors opening echoed like thunder through the hall. Every Zalorian turned their gaze toward the entrance as the delegation from Earth stepped. In at the front walked a man. He was tall, his frame wrapped in dark battle armor scorched by fire and marked with scratches that told stories of survival, not glory. His hair was short and rough, the color of burnt steel. His skin was pale beneath the dim hall lights, and his eyes, gray, sharp, human, held something ancient and unyielding. He moved with quiet confidence, not like a noble showing power, but like a soldier who had already seen death and refused to bow to it again. The hall's golden light reflected off the metal of his armor, making him look like a shadow walking through sunlight. The Emperor of Zelor, Lithera's father, watched with narrowed eyes. To him, this human was nothing more than a messenger from a dying world. The courtiers whispered and laughed softly, their voices dripping with arrogance, but the man did not seem to notice. He walked until he stood before the throne, then spoke, calm, clear, and proud. "I am Captain Elias Kane of Earth." He did not bow. He did not kneel. He simply stood there, tall and steady, his gaze level with the Emperor's. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush breath. Then he said, "I come to speak for my people." There was something in his tone, not defiance but dignity, a quiet kind of strength that needed no display, the kind that came from surviving when the universe tried to destroy you. For reasons she could not understand, Lithera felt her chest tighten. Her heart, usually so controlled, stumbled. She had met warriors before, handsome, fearless, ruthless, but none like him. There was no arrogance in his stance, no hunger for conquest in his eyes. Only purpose. When their eyes met, time seemed to slow. She saw the reflection of her vast empire in his gaze, but also saw something greater. Humanity's raw will to live, to fight, to protect. She could feel it in that single moment. This man carried the spirit of an entire world. Elias Kane spoke again, his voice softer this time. "We have no empire. We have no ancient gods. We only have ourselves, and we stand." Lithera's heart ached. She didn't know why. Around them the court continued in its cold formality, but to her everything had changed. The walls seemed to fade, the banners lost their meaning, and all she could see was him, a single human, standing unafraid in the hall of 1,000 stars. And that was the moment she fell. After the formal introductions, the court returned to their usual chatter, whispering about the humans as if they were toys to be examined and discarded. Yet Princess Lithera could not stop staring at the human warrior. Captain Elias Kane. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew her attention and refused to let go. She had never felt this way before, not even when surrounded by the most decorated knights of the Empire. She followed him with her eyes as he moved through the hall, answering questions with quiet confidence. The humans had come to request an alliance, a desperate plea for help against the raiders beyond the Veil Nebula. Many in the court laughed at the notion, dismissing the humans as fragile and insignificant, but Elias did not falter under their scrutiny. He answered each question carefully, speaking with a clarity and courage that seemed impossible for someone so young compared to the ancient Zalorian Empire. When he spoke, Lithera noticed the subtle strength behind his words. They were not hollow promises or political flattery. He did not bow to impress, nor did he exaggerate. He spoke the truth, simple and undeniable. "We fight not because we are strong," he said, his voice steady, "but because we must. There is no one else to stand." His eyes met hers briefly, and she felt it again, a strange pull like a current of wind across her chest. It was a gaze that seemed to see beyond her crown, beyond her robes, beyond the palace itself. It was a gaze that looked at her like she was real, like she mattered not because of her title but because of her soul. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the hall emptied, she found herself walking in the palace gardens hoping to see him again. The gardens were quiet, bathed in the soft light of twin moons. The flowers glowed faintly and the air smelled of distant oceans and alien winds. And there he was, standing beneath an arch of silver-leaved trees looking out at the stars. "You do not fear my father," Lithera said softly, stepping closer. Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it. Elias turned, his eyes catching the moonlight. For a moment she saw nothing but calm, nothing but certainty. "Your father bleeds." "So do I," he said simply. "Fear belongs to gods, not to men." The words hit her harder than any poem or song she had ever heard. They carried weight, honesty, and a kind of fierce integrity. He was not trying to charm her. He was not trying to impress her. He was simply himself. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, a rhythm she could not control. It frightened her, yet it exhilarated her at the same time. She wanted to run to him, to touch him, to know everything about him in that one instant, but she stayed rooted, afraid that moving might break some fragile spell. "Why do you stand for your people so bravely?" she asked after a long silence. He smiled faintly, but it was not a human smile. It was a soldier's acknowledgement of truth. "Because no one else will," he said. "We are all we have. That is enough." Lithera's chest tightened again. The simplicity of his words, the honesty in his gaze made her feel as if the universe itself had narrowed to just that moment. She had seen thousands of soldiers, warriors, and nobles, but none had this, none had the raw, unshakable courage to stand not for glory, not for power, but simply because it was right. She realized then that she was no longer just curious. She was drawn to him in a way that terrified her and thrilled her all at once. A strange, undeniable certainty settled in her heart. This human warrior, Captain Elias Kane, had already claimed something precious inside her, something she could not give back, and the thought made her pulse race. The court's laughter had barely faded when a Zalorian noble stepped forward, his armor gleaming with pride and arrogance. He was tall, like all of them, with eyes sharp and cruel. He sneered at Elias Kane as if a human could not possibly be worthy of respect. "You dare stand in the Grand Hall, stranger?" the noble said. "Do you think your weak species can survive our tests of strength?" The Emperor's eyes flicked between his daughter and the two warriors, silently warning Lithera to stay calm. But her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She had feared this moment, yet something deep inside told her that Elias would not falter. Elias did not flinch. He simply nodded. "If a duel is what you require, I will accept," he said, his voice quiet. But every word carried the weight of steel. The courtiers gasped. A human against a Zalorian knight? It was unheard of. They were the strongest warriors in the galaxy, trained for centuries in combat, their bodies honed to perfection. A human, fragile and soft by comparison, should not even survive 10 seconds. The hall was cleared, leaving only the emperor, the princess, the noble, and the human. The lights dimmed and the sound of their breathing echoed like distant drums. Lethera's hands clenched at her sides. She could feel the tension vibrating through the floor, through the air, even through her chest. The duel began. The Zalorian knight struck first, swinging his plasma blade in a golden arc. The light was blinding, and his speed unmatched by any creature Lethera had ever seen. But Elias moved with an instinctive grace, dodging with sharp, efficient movements. There was no flourish, no unnecessary motion, only survival and precision. Each dodge, each shift of weight spoke of countless battles fought for life itself. The noble laughed, a cruel, haughty sound. "Is this your species' idea of skill?" He jeered. Elias said nothing. He waited. Then, in a motion almost too fast to see, he caught the Zalorian's wrist mid-swing, twisting it until the plasma blade fell with a hiss to the floor. The knight tried to push back, but Elias's strength, trained by desperation and sheer will, held him in place. With a final controlled movement, Elias slammed the knight to the ground. The hall went silent. Every eye stared at the human warrior, disbelief etched into every face. Elias released the noble, stepping back with calm dignity. "We don't fight to impress," he said quietly. "We fight to protect." Lethera's breath caught in her throat. She had expected victory, yes, but not in this way. She had not expected to see the raw, unstoppable strength that came from will alone. His body, his mind, his spirit. Every part of him spoke of determination and courage that could not be measured by any standard in the galaxy. Even the Emperor, proud and stern, could not hide his surprise. The human had won not by luck, not by cunning, but by a force of nature that refused to break. Lethera felt a strange heat in her chest, a mix of pride and awe. She had watched the impossible happen before her eyes, and it was beautiful. The human who had walked into the hall with nothing but truth and courage had proven himself. The defeated knight got to his feet, glaring at Elias with humiliation and shock. But Elias only nodded respectfully, showing no malice. "There is honor in courage," he said. "Even when it is defeated, it is not destroyed." Lethera's heart swelled. She had fallen for him the moment he entered the hall, but now, after seeing him stand unbroken before the mightiest warriors of the Empire, she knew she was lost. There was no returning from this. And as she watched him walk past her, tall and steady, she felt an unspoken promise echo through the hall. This human, fragile by the standards of the galaxy, yet unyielding in spirit, was destined to change everything. Her hand twitched, almost reaching for him. Almost, but she held back, knowing this was only the beginning. The day after the duel, the grand hall was quiet, almost eerily so. The echoes of clashing blades still lingered in the marble floors, a reminder of what had just occurred. Princess Lethera walked through the corridors, her mind heavy with thoughts of Elias Kane. She could still see him, the calm determination in his gray eyes, the way he moved without fear, the quiet power that radiated from him. Every part of her wanted to see him again, to speak to him, to understand how a single human could carry the weight of an entire world so effortlessly. But she knew she could not. The Emperor summoned her to his private chambers. His eyes were sharp, his presence commanding as he regarded her with a mixture of anger and concern. The room was vast, lined with towering shelves of books and relics, each one a symbol of the Empire's power and history. Yet none of it mattered to her in that moment. She only felt the weight of his gaze. "You are drawn to the human," the Emperor said, his voice low but firm. "Do not deny it, Lethera. I see it in your eyes." She did not flinch. "I do not deny it, Father," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. She could not hide the truth. Not now. Not after seeing him stand against your noble knights and survive with honor. His eyes narrowed, filled with a cold intensity that made her stomach tighten.
"You are a princess of the Zalorian Empire," he said.
"Your life is not your own. You are expected to marry a warrior of our people. to unite families, to strengthen the empire, not to fall for a human, a mortal, fragile, insignificant human. Lithara's hands clenched at her sides. "He is not insignificant," she said softly yet firmly. "He has more courage, more honor than many who have ruled for centuries. I have seen it with my own eyes." The Emperor's face darkened. "You are blinded by emotion. That human will not live long in this galaxy, and even if he does, he cannot protect you or the Empire. He is flesh and bone. One day he will fail, and when he does, your heart will break. I would rather break with someone brave and true than live with someone who only seeks power," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "I have seen him fight for his people without fear. I have seen him stand when everyone else would fall. That is worth more than all the titles and riches in this empire." The Emperor's jaw tightened. He had ruled countless planets, defeated entire armies, and yet he could not understand this stubborn resolve in his daughter. "Love is a luxury for the weak, Lithara," he said. "You are not weak. You are a princess. You are expected to think with your mind, not your heart." She took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions. "And yet, Father, my heart has already chosen," she said. "It does not ask for permission. It knows what it wants." He stepped closer, the weight of his authority pressing down on her. "You will not see him again," he commanded, his voice final. "You will forget this human, or you will bring shame to our family, to yourself, and to the Empire." Lithara looked into her father's eyes and saw the unyielding force of tradition, of duty, of centuries of expectation. But she also felt something stirring inside her, a strength she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. She would not abandon what she felt. She would not deny the truth that had taken root in her heart from the moment Elias Kane had entered the Grand Hall. "I cannot," she whispered, almost to herself. "I will not." The Emperor's hand clenched at his side, a mixture of anger and disbelief etched on his face. For the first time, Lithara realized that love, true, powerful, unshakable love, yours could challenge even the oldest, strongest authority in the galaxy. As she left the room, her heart heavy but unbroken, she knew one thing with perfect clarity: no command, no tradition, no emperor could make her forget him. Elias Kane had changed her forever, and somewhere deep inside she felt the first spark of defiance, a spark that would grow into a fire. She would find him again. She would stand with him. And no matter the cost, she would not let him go. Weeks had passed since the Emperor's warning, but Lithara could not stop thinking about Elias Kane. Every moment felt heavy with longing, every breath a reminder of the human warrior she could not forget.
She had wandered the palace halls aimlessly,
touching the silver railings, watching the stars from her window, imagining his face, his calm gray eyes, and the quiet strength that had captured her heart. Then the news arrived. The raiders beyond the Veil Nebula had attacked. Entire settlements had fallen, ships were destroyed, and planets burned. Panic swept through the Empire, but Elias Kane and his soldiers were already preparing to return home to defend their worlds. Lithara felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She had known this day would come. He could not stay in the safety of the palace forever. He belonged to the stars, to his people, to battles she could not fight alongside him. That night, under the twin moons of Zelor, she slipped quietly from her quarters and made her way to the gardens. The silver leaves shimmered in the moonlight, and the scent of alien flowers hung in the air. She found him there, standing tall and quiet, gazing at the stars as if reading the future. "You can't go," she said, her voice trembling. Her hands reached out but stopped midair, afraid he might vanish like a dream. Elias turned, and for a moment the stars reflected in his eyes, giving him an almost otherworldly glow. "I must," he said softly. "My people need me. I promised them I would stand. I cannot abandon that promise." Tears welled in her eyes, but she forced herself to stay calm. "And if you die?" she whispered. Her voice cracked as the words escaped. He stepped closer, and for the first time Lithara noticed the faint scars on his armor. the worn edges of his gloves, the fatigue beneath his steady gaze. "Then I die as a human should," he said, standing. Her hands found his, rough and warm against her fingers. She wanted to hold on forever, to pull him back from the impossible, to stay in this moment and never let the universe take him away. But she knew it was impossible. He had his duty and she could not stop him. "You have to be careful," she said, her voice breaking. "You cannot face them alone. The raiders, they are merciless." "I am not alone," he said quietly, squeezing her hands. "Every soldier with me stands as one. Every human who has survived the impossible stands with me. And now for a moment you are with me too." Lethera felt a shiver run through her. Just knowing he carried her trust, her hope, gave him a part of her courage. She wanted to say more, to tell him everything, but the words lodged in her throat. "I will return," he promised. His voice steady despite the weight of the coming war. "No matter what happens, I will come back to you." She nodded, biting her lip to keep the tears from falling. "Then go, warrior of Earth," she whispered, "and may the stars remember your name." Elias leaned forward briefly, pressing his forehead to hers. The contact was electric, full of unspoken words, full of promise, full of love neither dared to speak aloud. Then he stepped back, tightened his armor, and turned toward the ship waiting beyond the gardens. Lethera watched him disappear into the night, the silver leaves reflecting the light of the moons like shards of broken hope. Her heart ached, but it was not fear. It was pride. She knew he would fight, not for glory, not for power, but because he must. Because humanity would survive and he would survive. As the engines of his ship roared to life, lifting him into the darkness of space, Lethera whispered into the night, her voice almost lost among the wind. "Come back to me, Elias Kane, come back." And somewhere beyond the Veil Nebula, Captain Elias Kane looked at the distant glow of Zelor's moons, feeling the quiet strength of the princess who had already captured his heart. He carried her hope with him into the war that awaited, a reminder that even in the darkest battles, humanity stood unbroken. Months passed, but the war beyond the Veil Nebula left more questions than answers. Reports arrived slowly, fragmented, sometimes not at all. Entire fleets had vanished. Planets were destroyed, and the humans who had fought so bravely were now shadows in the Emperor's archives. Yet for Lethera, none of the official reports mattered. She cared only for one human, Elias Kane. Every night she would stand by her window, staring at the twin moons of Zelor, imagining him flying among the stars, facing impossible odds. The hallways of the palace were quieter without him. The gardens were less alive. Even the flowers seemed dull compared to the memory of his presence. Her heart ached in a way she had never known. It was a heavy, restless ache, the kind that reminded her she was alive, that she had loved someone extraordinary. The courtiers had mostly forgotten him. To them, the humans were a minor species, a fleeting curiosity. Many whispered that Elias Kane had probably perished along with the raiders, as the reports suggested countless losses. But Lethera refused to believe it. She could not. One evening, a small message arrived. Fragile, burned around the edges, static crackling through the words, as if the universe itself had tried to swallow it. She tore it open with trembling hands and pressed it close to her chest. Through the storm of interference, she could hear his voice. "This is Captain Elias Kane. Earth still stands." The words were short, broken, almost impossible to understand. But they were enough. Enough to ignite hope where despair had tried to settle. Her knees weakened and she sank to the floor, clutching the message. The tears she had held back for months finally spilled, hot and unstoppable. She laughed quietly between sobs, shaking her head in disbelief. He was alive. Against all odds, against all the power and danger of the galaxy, he had survived. The relief and pride she felt were mixed with fear. She knew the war was not fully over. He had survived, yes, but the path ahead remained dangerous. Her heart pounded as she imagined him in the midst of battle, fighting for his people, carrying not only his life but the lives of countless others on his shoulders. And still, he had remembered her. In the middle of chaos, he had sent her a sign. A single phrase. Simple, human, yet filled with meaning. Earth still stands. She held the message close, feeling warmth spread through her chest. It was more than hope. It was a connection across the void, a thread tying her heart to his. She could almost hear his voice in her mind, steady, calm, unyielding. "I will return," it seemed to say. Night after night, Lethera watched the stars, listening for any hint of his return. Each light, each distant planet, each passing comet became a symbol of his survival. She spoke to the stars quietly, as if they could carry her words across the void. "Come back to me. Come back, Elias Kane, we are waiting." In the palace, she began to move differently. Her steps were lighter, her gaze sharper, and a quiet fire burned in her chest. The court could not see it, but she was no longer just a princess bound by tradition. She was someone who had loved and lost, even if only temporarily, and that love had made her stronger, braver, and more determined. Her heart refused to surrender to despair. She knew that humans were resilient. She had seen it in Elias Kane. And if he could survive impossible odds, so could their love. The twin moons rose again, silver and unwavering, casting their light over the quiet gardens. Lethera closed her eyes and whispered into the night, "I am still here. I will wait. No matter what it takes, I will not forget you." And somewhere, across the vast expanse of space, Captain Elias Kane pressed forward in the endless darkness of the war, unaware that one pair of eyes on Zelor's moons burned with hope, love, and faith that he would survive and return. The grand hall of the Zelorian Empire was silent that evening, unusually still for a place so accustomed to ceremony, power, and grandeur. The banners of conquered worlds hung motionless, and the marble floors reflected the light of the twin moons above. Princess Lethera stood near the throne, her heart tight with anticipation. She had waited for this moment for what felt like an eternity, yet she could hardly believe it was real. Outside, a ship descended from the stars, engines humming like a heartbeat. It was the vessel from Earth, battered and scarred from countless battles, yet still intact, a testament to the human spirit. The crowd of nobles stirred, whispering rumors and predictions, but Lethera did not notice. Her gaze was fixed on the ramp, the place where hope would become reality. And then he appeared. Captain Elias Kane stepped down from the ship, tall, weathered, and scarred, yet unbroken. His armor bore the marks of war, scratches and dents telling stories of countless fights, yet his gray eyes were as steady as ever. He scanned the hall, and the moment his gaze met hers, the world seemed to tilt, the noise of the court fading into nothingness. For Lethera, all the fear, longing, and months of silent waiting melted away. Every heartbeat screamed with relief, joy, and a love too deep for words. He was alive. He had returned. "Your Highness?" Elias said softly, his voice carrying both humility and certainty. He bowed slightly, a soldier's respect, but also a human gesture filled with intimacy she could feel in her bones. She stepped forward, her flowing robes catching the moonlight, her hair shimmering like silver threads. "You kept your promise," she whispered, barely able to speak through the tears that threatened to fall. "I told you I would," he said, his lips curling into a faint, tired smile. "I always return." The Emperor watched from his throne, his expression unreadable. He had expected caution, perhaps hesitation, but now he saw the truth. The human warrior before him had fought impossible odds, had survived, and had returned not as a subject, not as a beggar, but as a hero. One who commanded respect through courage, honor, and unyielding strength. Lethera moved closer, closing the distance between them, and Elias reached out, taking her hand in his, rough, scarred, and warm. The connection sent shivers through her entire body. She felt the solidity of him, the reality of him, and for the first time in months the universe seemed right again. "I waited for you," she said softly, Her voice trembled, but there was no fear. Only truth. Every day, every night. I waited, and I felt it, he replied. Even across the stars, I could feel your hope. It gave me strength when everything else tried to break me. The crowd had begun to notice, whispers growing into awe, but Lithera and Elias were no longer aware of them. Nothing existed beyond the pull of their shared gaze, the unspoken bond forged in war, distance and enduring hope. Elias bent slightly, his forehead brushing hers in a gesture of reverence and intimacy. You are my home, he said quietly. The reason I returned. She smiled through her tears, the weight of months falling away. And you are mine, she said. My warrior, my heart, my truth. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice deep and resonant. Perhaps I underestimated the human spirit, he admitted, a trace of reluctant respect in his tone. Your courage is undeniable, and it seems love has its own power, beyond even the greatest of empires. Lithera squeezed Elias's hand, feeling the warmth, the life, the promise of a future together. He had fought across the galaxy, survived impossible odds, and now stood beside her, not as a visitor, not as a mortal, but as a hero worthy of her heart and of the stars themselves. For the first time in her life, she felt the fullness of hope, pride, and love converge, and when Elias leaned close, their foreheads touching, she whispered into the quiet of the hall, We will face everything together. Always. He smiled, a soft human smile that carried the weight of every battle, every hardship, every longing moment across the stars. Always, he agreed. And as the twin moons of Zelor shone down on them, the grand hall seemed to shine brighter than ever before. A princess and a human warrior, standing side by side, not as conqueror and subject, but as equals, as partners, as two hearts bound across time and space. The stars themselves seemed to celebrate their union, twinkling in a rhythm that whispered of hope, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. And for the first time in the long history of the Zelorian Empire, a single truth became clear. When a human stands, they stand for everything: love, honor, hope, and the unyielding courage to return. The end.